Imagine JFK standing in front of cameras during the Cuban Missile Crisis, explaining the risk of nuclear war in sober detail. He didn't joke, he didn't deflect, he laid out the stakes clearly because the nation needed honesty. Now, imagine a president today at a press conference joking about renaming the Strait of Hormuz in the middle of a global crisis. That's not leadership, that's disgrace and extremely embarrassing. Leadership is tested not in comfort, but in crisis. It's revealed in how leaders face hard questions, how they respond to emergencies, and how they communicate with the people. History shows us when leaders embrace accountability, nations grow stronger. When they avoid it, decline sets in. In the past, leaders faced hard questions head on. In 1962, JFK was asked directly about the possibility of nuclear war. He didn't dodge. He explained the negotiations with the Soviets, the dangers of escalation, and why restraint mattered. That kind of clarity built trust in a moment of fear. FDR did the same. Hostile reporters pressed him on banking reforms, and he walked them through in detail, explaining why deposits would be safe. Now compare that to today. Trump was asked about healthcare, one of the most pressing issues for millions of Americans. His answer? He had concepts of a plan. No detail, no accountability, and the press barely pushed back. When leaders fear questions and the press stops asking them, decline sets in. History reminds us that crisis is the ultimate test of leadership. Lincoln spoke openly about sacrifice and unity during the Civil War. FDR explained the New Deal in detail, calming panic by showing how job programs and bank reforms would stabilize the nation. Truman laid out the stakes of NATO and the Marshall Plan, explaining why America had to lead in rebuilding a shattered world. Now look at today. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the most critical shipping lanes in the world, is closed. It's a global crisis. And yet, at a press conference, Trump joked about calling it the Strait of Trump. In a moment that demands seriousness and a plan, we got a disgraceful answer. We've never been so in the dark during a crisis. Even though we live in the most connected age in history, past leaders gave clarity in crisis. Today, crisis is used to obscure, or worse, to entertain. That's decline. Communication is where leadership either builds trust or destroys it. FDR's fireside chats explain banking reforms in plain language, calming panic by walking people step by step through what was happening. Eisenhower's final address was a serious, thoughtful warning about the military-industrial complex, a message meant to inform the public about long-term risk. Again, compare that to today. We've seen leaders dismiss mistakes as jokes or say, don't take it literally. But it goes further. A president joking about dropping human waste from planes onto citizens protesting, that's not communication. A video showing himself as a golden statue in the middle of a humanitarian crisis, that's not informing the public, that's self-worship. Tweeting that he's glad someone is dead, again, that's not leadership, that's cruelty. When has there ever been a time in history when we couldn't take our president seriously? When communication itself became dangerous? Decline shows up when words shift from informing to manipulating, from seriousness to disgrace. Decline reveals itself when leaders avoid questions, shrink from crisis, and manipulate instead of inform. But history reminds us transparency and courage are always possible. Decline is not destiny. And courage doesn't only live in politics. It lives in communities, in movements, in people willing to speak out, even when it costs them. Saturday's protests were proof. Millions stood up, not because it was safe, but because it was right. That's leadership too. If cowardice is contagious, then so is courage. And in the next episode, we'll look at another example of moral courage, proof that leadership can rise again. I hope you got something out of this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have a great day. Thank you so much for watching.